Hi there, my name's Simon Levette. I'm Centre Manager at the ABC Assessment Centre, and today we're going to demonstrate how to install a masonry support angle system to manufacturer's specifications. With me is Ian Mitchell, and Ian's going to help me with the practical part of the install today. So before we start, I just want to get a couple of words from Ian about his construction industry experience and how he's going to help me today.
Thank you very much, Simon. I bring 30 years experience to this training video today. 3 years as a bricklaying apprentice, another 17 years on site gaining experience, moving on to a site manager's and a contracts manager's role. So 30 odd years experience. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So, first of all, just a little bit of background for those of you who are wondering what masonry support actually is, because you may have not heard of the term before. After all, you probably wouldn't have seen it if you're working on smaller house building jobs, for example, since the masonry support angle systems are only specified for buildings that have more than 3 stories or are at least 9 meters in height, whichever is less. And therefore, if you've been working on commercial jobs or large-scale residential projects, it's something that you may have come across before. So, what exactly is a masonry support angle? As the name suggests, it is support for masonry, and it's a steel support that is fixed to the inner leaf and has a steel angle or shelf that props up the brickwork on the external leaf and supports the brickwork that is being built off of it. This shelf angle provides relief or support for the brickwork against forces, for example, differential movement. These could lead, in the worst case scenario, to a complete failure, but also to bellying and cracking of the brickwork. Although it is dependent upon architect specifications, masonry support is usually installed every other floor on high-rise buildings and to a datum height all the way around that building. So, when you think about how many large-scale projects there are out there in terms of new construction, that's a lot of masonry support that needs to go in. So when you think about this competence that we're looking at today, it's massive in terms of employability and ability for you to get work in the future. This video accompanies the ABC Assessment Centre's short course on masonry support angle installation, which goes into a little bit more detail about the different types of masonry support, the different configurations there are, how masonry support takes the building regulations into account, and also some of the commonly found products that we have out there on the market today. But the last thing we'll do before going into the install procedure is look at a little bit of health and safety. Some health and safety considerations to be aware of when you're fitting masonry support angle systems. Some larger and heavier masonry support components could exceed the amount that one operative should be able to lift and handle and fit on site. Therefore, certainly when you're fixing and offering up to the backing structure, and also when you're transporting around site, work in pairs or seek mechanical methods of transportation. When working with shear plate metal, be careful of cuts and lacerations, as there is an increased chance of this occurring. Also, make sure that your workspace is clean and tidy and free from any hazards that could lead to slips, trips and falls. If you are using a mechanical fix as part of this install, which you almost certainly will be, make sure your power tools are pure registered, make sure that they have the correct bits for the masonry or steel that you're cutting into, monitor for HAVs at all times, and also be aware of task-specific PPE, for example, face-fitted dust mask if drilling into concrete, and ear defenders or earplugs in all cases when drilling. In any case, you should find all of these in the RAMS document, and you should read carefully before undertaking any task. Before we go any further in this video, it's worth pointing out the personal protective equipment or PPE that you must wear when on site, because without wearing this personal protective equipment, you cannot even get to the point where you're doing the installation, similar to that we're doing on the video today. So, what do I mean by PPE? Well, it's a 5-point PPE, and myself and Ian here have the correct 5-point PPE, which consists of hard hat, glasses, high-vis vest, gloves, and steel toe cap boots. Remember, there are some jobs on site or some tasks that require additional PPE, and information related to these can all be found in the RAMS document. Okay, so you've joined me over at the equipment table, where on this table I have everything that we need for the installation of a masonry support angle system. So I guess the main player, the main event really is the bracket angle itself. To make the holes, obviously we need a drill, the special metal drill bits, remember not masonry drill bits for the purposes of the installation we're doing today. Obviously we've got our levels, both traditional level and our laser level. Over here we have isolation gaskets. We also have backing shims, calibrated torque wrench with a socket set. For the fixing plates, we have normal bolts, set screws and washers. We also have a special type of washer, which is an alternative to a serrated washer. Finally, what we call HD bolts. So these are much more heavy duty. These are tapped in with a hammer and expand when screwed in. Ian is now attaching the set screws to the rear of the fixing plate and adding the isolation gasket to the front of the fixing plate. Having correctly set out the components of the masonry support angle system, with my help, Ian is now lifting the adequate support system into position where we have just put the isolation gasket and bolt in through the rear of the fixing. Now that the angle is at the required height, it is now a case of attaching and aligning the fixings and making sure that the grooves in the grooved washer sit back against the bracket. As you can see, Ian is now hand tightening the nuts, making final adjustments so that the system remains level. Now that Ian has installed both units and has made sure that both fixings are hand tightened and they are both level to one another, and there is a 10mm nominal gap between both components, it is now time to take a torque wrench and tighten up the fixings using the torque wrench. Now that we've moved on to the hollow steel section of the training frames, Ian is showing us how to construct the internal corner from the drawings and the specifications given by the manufacturer. The first step is to install the HD bolts as provided by the manufacturer so that they can provide a solid base for hanging on the masonry support systems on this section. Once the isolation gaskets are included as per previous installation, Ian is now, with my help, is offering up the component to the return section of the wall. Using the laser level and a spirit level as a guide, Ian and I are now leveling off this component of the system, making sure that it is at the same height as the horizontal section that we have already installed a moment ago. Ian and I are now lifting the masonry support angle unit that finishes the internal corner into place, hanging the brackets on the HD bolts and leveling them with the return angle we've just added. Now that both components have been leveled and the nuts on both of the fixings have been hand tightened, it's time to tighten with a torque wrench. The process is exactly the same, even though the fixings are slightly different. So there you have it. We've fitted our masonry support angle system into our steel frame in two different ways. One into our steel fixing plates and also into a steel hollow beam or RSJ. It's worth noting that we've done the install today under controlled conditions. Out on site, you might have a few more challenges, for example, inaccuracies in the slab that you're fixing back to, and you may need to use more packing shims, and you may need to make more adjustment in the system itself. I hope you found this install video very useful, and I'm going to pass over to Ian just before we finish to give a few tips on best practice and how to best install this type of system. So over to you, Ian.
Thank you very much, Simon. As this is a component part installation, let's check all the component parts are to hand, are correct to the drawings. Our tools are fully charged. If training leads are used, let's make sure they're protected. A third-party check on any tightness of any fixings, but generally just follow the drawings and we should be fine. Thank you, Simon.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Yes. And as you're right, it's never been more important to get the correct training for this kind of competency, as well as things like checking and quality assurance and making sure that these kind of things are signed off and are done to the manufacturer's specifications. After all, masonry support is exactly that. It holds up the building and it keeps our brickwork up. So if we can do the correct training and we can do the correct things to ensure that we're fully trained, then we are on the right track. All that's left to say really is on behalf of Ian and myself, thank you for watching, and hopefully you can join us again for another install video.